Harper Audio presents The Patron Saint of Liars by Ann Patchett, performed by Julia Gibson. Copyright 1992 by Ann Patchett. Production copyright 2007 by HarperCollins Publishers. Habit. 2 o'clock in the morning, a Thursday morning, the first bit of water broke through the ground of George Clatterbuck's back pasture in Habit, Kentucky, and not a living soul saw it. Spring didn't care. Water never needed anyone's help to come up through the ground once it was ready. There are rivers, hundreds of them, running underground all the time, and because of this, a man can say he is walking on water. This was a hot spring that had broken loose of its river to make mud in the grass, and it kept on till it was a clear pool, and then a little creek cutting out a snake's path toward the Panther River. Water will always seek out its own. George Clatterbuck found it when it was already a pretty steady stream. It was only fitting that he should be the one, seeing as how it was his land. It was 1906. He was hunting for his family's dinner. He smelled the spring before he saw it, foul and sulphurous as spoiled eggs. He thought it was a bad sign, that it meant his land was infected and spitting up bile for relief. The water was warm when he dipped in his hand, and he wiped it off against the leg of his trousers. He was thinking about it, thinking what he ought to do, when he saw a rabbit on the other side of the field. It was as big a buck as he'd seen, and he knelt down slowly to get off his shot. He had to shoot on his knees. His father taught him that way because he was afraid the rifle's kick would knock the boy off his feet, thought George would be safer close to the ground. But since that was the way George learned, that was the only way he could ever do it. And now here he was, grown with a family, going down on his knees like a man in prayer to shoot a rabbit. He blew the head clean off and didn't disturb the pelt. He thought he would tan the hide and give it to his daughter June for her birthday. June, like many little girls, was partial to soft things. By the time he'd tied the legs onto his belt, he'd forgotten about the water altogether. It wasn't long after that. Times turned hard for the Clatterbucks. Both plow horses came down with colic, and Betsy, the horse George rode to town, got a ringworm thick as your thumb that no amount of gentian violet could clear. Not a week after, every last one of his cows came down with mastitis that left them all drier than bones. George had to get up every 3 hours in the night and bottle feed the calves, whose crying put his wife beside herself. "Sounds like a dying child," she said, and she shivered. George didn't say this to her, but he was thinking he might have to slaughter the calves and take his losses. Bought milk was more than he could afford. Then, if he didn't have enough to worry about, the horses broke free of the corral. George took some rope and set out to bring them back, cursing the rain and the mud and the stupid animals with every step. He found them at that spring he had forgotten, drinking so deeply he thought they'd found her. He was frightened then because he thought such water would kill them, and where would the money come from to buy 3 new horses? But the horses were fine. Betsy's hide was smooth where the ringworm had been, and the other 2 were past their own disorder. George knew it was the spring that had done this, but he didn't know if it was the work of the devil or the Lord. He didn't tell a soul when he drove his sick cows down to the water, but by the time they came home their udders were so full they looked like they might burst on the ground. Then little June took sick and laid in her bed like a dull penny. Doctor came from Owensboro and said it wasn't the pox or scarlet fever, but something else that was burning her alive. She was slipping away so fast you could all but see her dying right before your eyes.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?